Alright, legends, welcome along to Sceam Me Up Botty. We're going to get into some more Star Trek here. This one, we're going to be talking a little bit about Star Trek Nemesis. Now, I don't hate Star Trek Nemesis, but I do kind of understand why this was the last movie they made in that current run of the films. The last movie before this one, Insurrection, and this one, it just felt like a big episode of the Next Generation. And I did say in that review, I feel that it's just because the production value of the Next Generation was that high, like it wasn't that far away from movie quality, in all honesty. And yes, it is what it is, but I'm kind of two minds about the ending of this film. And I did say, I believe also in the last review, I was talking about doing the next steps after the movies. And I think the first series we'll do on the show will be Star Trek Picard, because it leans very, very heavily into what happens in Star Trek Nemesis. If you've not seen Picard yet, well, obviously you're listening to a Star Trek podcast. You're into Star Trek. You obviously have watched it, but we'll get to that in due course. But Nemesis, 2002. For some reason I thought it was before 2002. It was directed by Stuart Baird, the 10th film in the franchise, and the 4th and final to star the Next Generation cast. Written by John Logan, from a story developed by Logan, Brent Spinner, and producer Rick Berman. The Enterprise E and the crew are forced to deal with a threat to the United Federation of Planets from a clone of Captain Picard named Shinzon, who has taken control of the Romulan Empire. The film's good, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. It's not that I find it hard work, it's not a go-to for me, in all honesty. Like the whole of the original cast is back in here, and it's a fairly decent time. How much money did it make? The film was a box office failure. I'm just looking at the internet here while I'm doing this here. Principal photography of the film took place November 2001 to March 2002. Nemesis held its world premiere at the Grubens Chinese Theatre in Los Angeles on December 9th, 2002. The film was released in North America December 13th, 2002, and received generally mixed reviews, with publications criticising it for being the least successful in the franchise. The film at the box office was a complete failure, earning $67 million worldwide against a $60 million budget. Plans for a final film featuring the Next Generation cast was scrapped, and the film series was rebooted instead of Star Trek in 2009, which was a box office success. Now, that's fresh news to me, because the way this here film ends, it really does kind of tie up all the loose ends. It's Riker and Troy, they get married, they move on to their new life. Riker even gets his own ship after too many years of turning stuff down. And as much as I didn't like what they did with Data at the end of this movie, I do kind of get it, because Picard from Star Trek Generations, if you think back to that film, when he discovers that his his brother and his nephew have died in a fire, and he's the only Picard left, and he has the conversation with Troy that, he's the Picard line is going to end with him. He's not going to have any children or anything to carry on the Picard name. So at the end of this film, he has the droid B4, the android B4, which is pretty much an earlier version of Data. Data tried to upload his engrams into him, and at the end of the film, Picard is talking to him, and almost like a father to a son sort of a thing. This version of Data B4 isn't as advanced, so he's very childlike in the way that he does things. And at the end of the film, it's B4 starts to sing Blue Skies, which the real Data had been singing at the beginning of the film at the wedding of Troy and Riker. So at the end of the movie, you get three of the main characters getting, a new path in life, and Picard, though he doesn't have any family or children of his own, he now has this android version of Data, which is almost like a child itself. And at the end of the movie, he leaves the room, and B4 starting to sing Blue Skies, and Picard smiles and walks off. And it's almost as if, okay, Picard's going to be okay now, because he has something, even though it's not his own son, it's as close to a son as he's ever going to get. So I kind of appreciated it, the end of this movie, for what it had done for Picard. Give him a bit of meaning, more meaning to his life, if you get what I'm saying. But the film itself is, it is kind of hard work, in all fairness, although the effects on it are brilliant. At the beginning, on Romulus, the Senate, they're debating terms of peace and alliance with Reman rebel leader Shenzon. The Remans, of course, they're a slave race to the Romulan Empire from their neighbouring planet Remus, and they're used as miners and pretty much cannon fodder for the Empire. While a faction of the military supports Shenzon, the Praetor and the Senate oppose the alliance and reject the notion, and they are then, all of them, assassinated by the vice left in the room, which doesn't just, when I'm reading up on some of the details of this movie, and this is they're disintegrated, it's not even that there. It's almost as if all the liquid in their bodies, all the fluids is all dried up, and they pretty much, the Praetor falls on it, like he just dries out, skin cracks, and he falls in his face, and he bursts open like a clay. Like it's an amazing effect. Enterprise, we cut to that there, of course, as I did say, the marriage of Riker and Troy, the real Data serenades the couple of rendition of Blue Skies, and after the wedding ceremony on Earth, they actually have to go to Troy's home planet for a ceremony there. So they're going to have two wedding ceremonies, and there's a bit of comedy in here with Worf, who isn't happy at all because on Troy's planet they have to get married in the nude, so he's not up for that whatsoever. But even Picard's having a bit of fun at Worf and saying, like, a big strapping fella like you, what have you got to be worried about? If you need me, I'll be in the gym. That sort of deal. But on their way, they discover an energy reading from Colaris 3 near the Romulan neutral zone, And Picard, Worf and Data go down onto the planet and they find B4, as I say, a version of Data that they just pretty much deduce to be an earlier version of Data. It's just not as advanced. Of course, there was Data and Lore, like the two, the good version, the bad version in the series. But this one here, they just assume that this one was a prototype. It came before Data and Lore. But that's about as far as they go of trying to work that out. And Enterprise is then ordered to a diplomatic mission to Romulus. Shinzon, of course, taking over the Empire, and he wants to talk peace with the Federation. So, nobody's really going to fall for that one, as the Romulans after all. And, everybody is well within their rights to be suspicious of these guys. But Picard goes to meet Shinzon and quickly discovers that Shinzon is a clone of Picard. Not a clone that matches him in age, but it looks like Picard whenever he was younger. And he even offers a vial of his own blood to Picard and the crew so they can go and test it just to see, that he is indeed a clone of Picard. And they learn that he was secret. Well, he basically just tells them, the Romulans at one point had plans to clone certain members of the Federation and then kill the real one and put the clone in place, so they would have high-ranking officials within Starfleet itself. But with governments chopping and changing in the Romulan Empire, someone decided somewhere along the line that we're not going to follow through with this here, and cancelled the clone plan. And Shinzon was still a child at the time. He was left in Remus to die as a slave. And so he fought his way up. Pretty much the only human in the Romulan Empire, and he managed to fight his way up and become leader of the Remans. And he's built a heavily armed flagship called Scimitar. This thing here is producing low levels of deadly Theleron radiation, the Enterprise discovers, and that radiation is what they used at the beginning of the movie to kill the Senate. So this is a ship that's built with the ability to actually use this and target this energy. So by the end of the film, the ship's going to be heading towards Earth to take out the Federation. The thing is, with the way the clone idea was going to work, they couldn't wait for a lifetime for a clone to slowly grow. They had a process where at one point it would be, rapid aging up to the point where it would be compatible with the person that the clone was going to replace. But since the whole plan was scrapped, that part of the medical procedure, let's say, wasn't initiated in time. So Shinzon is actually dying, and the only way he can survive is to get a full transfusion of blood from Picard. So he wants to kill Picard, and just to protect himself so he can live on, sort of a deal. But Shinzon then kidnaps Picard and B4, and we discover that B4 was actually, he was planted on the planet as a lure. So, whenever you think about it that way, is B4 actually a prototype of Data, or was he constructed to pose as an earlier version? Was he built by the Romulans? That didn't really in the last few, and I've watched this film about 3 times since it came out. And it was released at a time where I was in a fairly busy stage in my own personal life. Where are we at? Yes, turns out the B4 that they have kidnapped along with Picard isn't in fact B4, but it is Data himself posing as B4. He rescues Picard, and they determine Shinzon plans to use the warship to invade the Federation using the Faileron radiation generator to eradicate all life. There is an entertaining part in that there escape where they get into this little like shuttlecraft, two-seater shuttle to get off the scimitar. It can cloak as well, and they can't get the space doors to open to escape, so they end up flying through the corridors of the ship inside this little two-seater thing with Picard piloting, Data sitting in there with him. I think Patrick Stewart, I should say, was having a mess load of fun in this film. And those little action sequences, there's a part earlier on when they're on the planet and he's on this like dune buggy sort of a deal, just having the time of his life. They get back to Enterprise and they're racing back to Federation space to try and beat the scimitar there and warn the Federation of what's going to happen, but they're intercepted by the scimitar, and despite the aid of 2 Romulan warbirds who realise Shinzon's gone daft here, stuff that there, we're swapping sides, we're going to help Enterprise here, and the fight begins. They're fairly quickly disabled, and Enterprise also heavily damaged. Picard actually tries to get the self-destruct going on Enterprise, but it's damaged as well, so he decides to ram the scimitar with the Enterprise, which is a really, really good effect sequence. Shinzon then, last ditch attempt, he's just like, he's on the verge of dying anyway, so he's like, I'm going to take everybody with me. He activates the Faileron weapon. Picard boards the scimitar, beams across, but everything's in that bad a shape. Transporter buckles. He's over there. They can't get him back. So they face off. Picard ends up killing them. And there's part of him that's, this is the enemy. He had to be stopped. But what he's really looking at when Shinzon dies is a younger, more youthful version of himself. A part of himself that if he had have made a different choice in his life, he could have been easily this character. But so when he dies, the scimitar is building up to pretty much self-destruct at this point, and at this point Data turns up after having, he can't transport from ship to ship, so he actually runs with the help of Geordi down a corridor to the front of the Enterprise, which is now tore to pieces after having rammed the scimitar. And when he's about to hit the force field, Geordi turns it off, and the decompression shoots him like a torpedo towards the scimitar. So he gets across there, and he has a little transporter beacon with him, emergency transporter, and just, it's pretty much a communicator. You just slap it on you, press the button, and it'll take you back to the Enterprise. Only problem is there's only one of them, so only one can survive. So Data, being the legend that he is, saves Picard, but sacrifices himself. He's on board the scimitar when it explodes. And yes, that pretty much closes off the film. We end up at the end of it. Riker leaving to go to the Titan, his new ship, and we have that scene with Picard and B4. I was talking about it earlier on the episode. Forgive me, I'm so tired tonight. I just had my second COVID vaccination yesterday, and I'm feeling the effects of it. But yes, this is a scene where B4 starts to sing Blue Skies, which closes out the movie. Now, I don't know where you fall at on this film, but as I did say, I do kind of understand and see why they made the decision to stop after this one. The last two movies that the Next Generation did were just huge versions of the show. They did not feel like films whatsoever. And this one in particular, like, I do have, even though Insurrection isn't a fantastic film, whenever you set it up along the previous installments, of the original cast, like, it's always going to be very hard to beat those original movies. And the Next Generation did a fairly decent job with First Contact, and you could say Generations as well. They kind of, they carried the weight in that film pretty well, but they did have Kirk in there with him, so that was the crossover movie, so it was there was a good safety net in that film. And as I say, their first solo adventure, First Contact, was absolutely fantastic. Like, it's right up there with the Wrath of Khan. Not as good as, well, whenever you're talking about the Next Generation movies, which is the best out of the four, and First Contact is definitely it. And if you're talking about the original cast, which was the best movie out of them, easily the Wrath of Khan. So First Contact was the Wrath of Khan for the Next Generation, but that was the height of their film outings. Like, it didn't get any better after that. Although I do enjoy Insurrection, I can watch that movie if it's on. If I'm flipping the channels, come across it, I'll watch it. But I have to say, Nemesis, it's probably the only film in the whole run of Star Trek movies that I can pass up, along with the new Kelvin timeline movies, and we'll get into those in the next 3 episodes. Although the first one is fairly good. But yes, join me for the next episode whenever we talk about Star Trek from, what year was it? I want to say 2009. Where did I see that? I had it noted down there somewhere. You can hear my... There you are. Yeah, Star Trek was 2009. Great job. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, guys. I am ready to pass out. So, forgive me for tripping through this episode. I'm not really feeling it tonight at all, but I'm trying my hardest to put this podcast back onto like a regular upload schedule. And Tuesdays and Thursdays every week if possible, and we are late in the upload tonight, but as I did say, I want to get these out for you twice a week. We're going to keep up with that there, so can't be perfect all the time, sorry guys, but yes, I'll talk to you in the next episode. Stay safe. This has been a production of Coins Age Media. Thank you so much for listening.